Lincoln Continental was a ghost gliding through Sterling Terrace. Officer Nolan Gregg watched it pass, a familiar bitterness rising in his throat. This was his turf, and this car was trespassing. He just needed a reason to prove it. 3 blocks. That's all it took. The Lincoln drifted into a right turn. The signal never flashed. Got you? The excuse was paper thin, but it was enough. Gregg hit the switch, and the manicured lawns and stone mansions were bathed in strobing red and blue. The Lincoln didn't jerk to a stop. It settled at the curb, a smooth, unhurried motion. The calm was an insult. Gregg slammed his cruiser door, the sound a crack of thunder in the quiet street. He owned this space. He wanted the driver to feel it in his bones. The driver's window whispered down. Behind the wheel sat a black man in his late 40s, his tailored suit sharp enough to cut glass. His hands were relaxed on the steering wheel. He wasn't scared. He wasn't worried. He just looked patient. Gregg's jaw tightened. He aimed his flashlight directly into the man's eyes, savoring the slight flinch. "Let's see some ID. Now." The man blinked the glare away. His voice was a deep, steady baritone. "Of course, officer. Was there a problem with my driving?" The polite tone, the calm question. It was a performance. It scraped at Gregg's nerves. "The problem," Gregg said, leaning in so close he could smell the man's expensive cologne, "is you forgot how to drive when you crossed into this zip code. That turn signal isn't just for decoration. Or are you in too much of a rush to get back to wherever it is you came from?" "I understand," the man said, his face a perfect mask. He reached for the glove compartment, each movement deliberate and slow. He presented his wallet. Gregg snatched it. The name on the license read Elias Foster. Gregg smirked, mispronouncing it deliberately. "So, Elias, what's your story? Lotto winner? Or is this just a really good rental?" He held onto the registration, tapping it against his palm. "Says here you're from Redwood Heights. That's a long way from home, isn't it?" "I manage," Foster replied, his voice still infuriatingly level. "I'm sure you do," Gregg sneered, pushing, prodding, waiting for the man to break. "Anything else I should know about?" "Just that I have a meeting to get to, if that's everything," Foster said. The dismissal, polite as it was, ignited a fuse in Gregg's gut. "Meeting? This guy? He thinks he can just brush me off. He thinks he's untouchable." "Oh, we're not done," Gregg hissed, his voice low and tight. "We are far from done. Get out of the car. Now." For the first time, a flicker of annoyance crossed Foster's face. His jaw set. "And the reason for that would be?" "Because I gave you a lawful order," Gregg snarled. "We can do this easy, or we can do this hard. It makes no difference to me. Get out." Foster held his gaze for a beat, then gave a stiff nod and stepped out of the car. He was taller than Gregg, with broad shoulders that filled out his suit. He carried himself with a quiet authority that made Gregg's uniform feel cheap. It was infuriating. "Hands on the trunk. Let's go." Foster turned without a word and placed his palms on the gleaming black paint. As his suit jacket pulled back, a thick, silver chain-link bracelet caught the flashing lights. Gregg's breath hitched. No, 2 years. His partner, Sam Keller, his career shattered by a fractured skull. The only lead was grainy footage of a tall man in the shadows, and the unmistakable glint of that exact bracelet on his wrist. In that instant, it was him. The rage was a white-hot flash. All the bitterness, all the resentment boiled over. Gregg's hand cracked across Foster's face. The sound sharp and ugly in the silent street. Foster's head snapped to the side. He didn't cry out. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there, a statue carved from granite. Then slowly he turned his head back. The patience in his eyes was gone, replaced by something cold and absolute. He looked right through Gregg. With a chilling calm, he reached inside his jacket. Gregg's hand instinctively went to his sidearm. But Foster just pulled out a black leather wallet. He flipped it open. A polished gold badge from the Northwood Police Department gleamed in the strobing lights. "Deputy Chief Elias Foster," he said, his voice quiet, but heavier than stone. "And you just assaulted a superior officer." Gregg's eyes were locked on the badge. The official seal of the Northwood Police Department. His own department. The world pitched violently, the street seeming to fall away beneath his boots. Deputy Chief, not a sergeant, not a captain. The Deputy Chief. He had just assaulted one of the most powerful men in the entire command structure. His throat closed up. The words wouldn't come. Foster slid the badge wallet back into his jacket with a slow, deliberate motion. His face was granite. "Am I at liberty to leave now, Officer Gregg?" The question wasn't angry. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the cold weight of a guillotine blade. All Gregg could do was manage a spastic, jerky nod. Foster took a single, deep breath, adjusted the lapel of his suit jacket, and walked back to the driver's side door. The Lincoln Continental's engine started with a low hum, and the car pulled away from the curb, vanishing into the night as if it had never been there. Gregg stood frozen, his hand burning, his heart hammering against his ribs. What have I done? The thought wasn't a question, it was a verdict. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had detonated his entire career, and the look in Foster's eyes promised the fallout was just beginning to drift down. His radio crackled, but the dispatcher's voice was a meaningless buzz from another universe. All Gregg could see was Foster's face, the unnerving calm more menacing than any shouted threat. It was the look of a predator who held all the advantages and was in no rush to make the kill. Headlights washed over him. It was Miller's patrol car. He got out, concern etched on his face. "Nolan, all clear here?" He glanced at the empty curb. "You look like you've seen a ghost, man." Gregg swallowed, forcing his face into a rigid mask. "Just some rich jerk with an attitude. I let him slide." Miller squinted, clearly not buying it. "You want me to check the plates just in case?" "No," Gregg snapped, the word coming out too fast, too loud. "I said it's done. Just a verbal." "Okay, man, take it easy," Miller said, holding up his hands. "Your call. See you back at the precinct." He climbed into his car and drove off, leaving Gregg alone in the pulsing lights with the suffocating weight of his own actions. Foster hadn't filed a report. Not yet. His silence was a weapon, and Gregg could feel its point pressed against his throat. He was being allowed to suffocate. The next 3 days were pure psychological warfare. The central precinct turned into a labyrinth of whispers that died the second he entered a room. Nobody spoke to him about it. They didn't have to. He saw the incident in every averted gaze. The slap, the badge, the cold, final judgment in Foster's eyes. A bomb was ticking in the squad room, and everyone was just bracing for the blast. Friday morning, his phone vibrated against the table. Blocked number. Just 4 words. My office. 1000. Gregg's stomach felt like it dropped through the floor. He didn't touch his coffee. The walk down the command hallway felt miles long, each footstep an indictment. He passed Captain Walsh's office. The captain looked up, met his eyes for a fraction of a second, and immediately buried his face in a file. He reached the heavy oak door. A simple brass plate read, Deputy Chief Elias Foster. He knocked once. Enter. Foster was by the window, a silhouette against the city skyline. He didn't turn. The silence in the office was suffocating. Gregg felt like a specimen pinned to a board. Finally, without looking at him, Foster spoke. Take a seat, Gregg. Gregg sat, his spine ramrod straight. Foster turned, his eyes cold and analytical. Have you been wondering why there isn't a report on your captain's desk, officer? Gregg swallowed dust. No, sir. A report is ink on paper. It's procedural, Foster said, pacing slowly toward his desk. I needed you to comprehend the weight, the reason, not just the physical act of the assault, but the why behind it. He leaned against the polished desk. You didn't pull over a citizen the other night. You pulled over a phantom you created in your own mind. And your hatred for that phantom was enough to make you strike a superior officer. Gregg's mouth opened. Sir, Foster held up a hand, and the word died in Gregg's throat. Don't. You saw a luxury car and decided who was inside. You heard me speak and made up your mind. You saw the color of my skin and passed your sentence right there on the street. My composure wasn't evidence of my innocence. To you, it was a display of insolence. It was proof of my guilt. I thought you were a suspect, Gregg whispered, the words sounding hollow and cowardly. An old case. Foster's stare was unwavering. Someone who looked like me, I imagine? He didn't need an answer. The bracelet. I saw the moment you noticed it. Let me guess the description on that old file. A tall black man? Gregg could only nod, shame burning his throat. Foster let out a long, slow breath. This meeting isn't a debate, Gregg. It's a notification. I needed you to know what happens next. Internal Affairs will be contacting you. They will have questions, he said, his eyes locking onto Greg's. "And when they call, I strongly advise you to have a complete and honest answer ready for them." He crossed the room and opened the door. "You're dismissed." It wasn't a second chance. It was a formal death sentence. Greg stumbled out of the office. Have an honest answer. What answer could possibly save him? The weekend was a sleepless blur of dread. Monday morning, his phone rang. The voice on the other end was clipped and devoid of emotion. "Officer Greg, you are hereby ordered to report to Central Precinct, Conference Room 3C, at 0900 hours for a formal interview with the Internal Affairs Division." The line went dead. He dressed in his uniform, but it felt like a cheap costume. At Central Precinct, the desk sergeant was suddenly fascinated by his computer screen, refusing to meet his eye. Word was already out. He was a dead man walking. Inside Conference Room 3C, three figures were waiting. Captain Walsh sat with a grim, tight-lipped expression. Beside him was a man in a severe suit, Investigator Finch from IAD. And at the head of the table, as still as a statue, sat Deputy Chief Elias Foster. Finch opened a folder, his movements precise. "Officer Gregg, this is a formal review of a traffic stop you conducted last Thursday. Let's start with the basics. Did you initiate that stop?" Gregg's throat was raw. "Yes, sir." "And at what point in this interaction," Finch asked, his pen hovering over a notepad, "did you determine that the use of physical force was appropriate?" Gregg looked from Finch's cold eyes to Captain Walsh's stony expression, and finally to Deputy Chief Foster, who watched him without a flicker of emotion. This was the precipice. I lost my composure," Gregg stammered. "I saw the bracelet on his wrist, and I reacted. I made an error in judgment. A terrible error." The room was deathly quiet. Finch made a small note. "An error," he echoed, his voice void of any feeling. "Your official report, filed later that evening, states the driver was, and I quote, verbally aggressive and non-compliant. Is that the statement you're sticking with?" Gregg's blood turned to ice. He glanced at Foster, searching for any sign, any way out. There was none. Only cold, hard reality waiting for him. "No, sir," he said, his voice finally cracking. "That report is false. He was cooperative at all times." Across the table, Foster's expression didn't change. He didn't have to say a word. Finch closed the folder with a quiet snap. "That will be all for now, officer. We will contact you regarding our findings." "Sit down, Gregg." The command came from Foster, quiet but absolute. It froze Gregg in place. Investigator Finch and Captain Walsh looked at Foster, who gave them a nearly imperceptible nod. They rose and left the room without a word. The click of the door latch sounded like a cell door locking. They were alone. "The IAD review was just for the record books," Foster said, his voice a low rumble as he rose and circled the table. He stood directly over Gregg. "This is the actual consequence. You didn't just break protocol. You assaulted a man, you lied in an official report, and you disgraced your badge because your pride couldn't stomach a black man who didn't shrink when you puffed out your chest." "Sir, please," Gregg rasped. "Stand up," Foster ordered. Gregg pushed himself shakily to his feet. "Your shield," Foster said, his voice flat and hard. "Unpin it. Place it on this table." With trembling, slick fingers, Gregg undid the clasp. The piece of metal, his entire identity, hit the polished wood with a clatter that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "Now your sidearm." A tremor shot through Gregg's body as he unholstered his service weapon, laying it next to the useless shield. Foster slid a single piece of paper and a pen across the table. It was a voluntary resignation form. "You sign that, and you cease to exist within this department. You refuse, and I will personally see to it that the DA prosecutes you for assault and perjury. You will go to prison. The choice is yours." Gregg stared at the document, his vision swimming. His entire life gone in less than 5 minutes. He snatched the pen, his hand shaking so badly that his signature was just an ugly, jagged line. Foster took the paper without looking at it. "Get out of my precinct," he said, his voice like ice. Gregg turned and walked, leaving his career, his power, and his identity on the table behind him. The door clicked shut, and the long, sterile hallway stretched out before him, a silent, empty future. Justice hadn't been allowed trial. It was a quiet, cold, and complete erasure.